Welcome back to the Shop Mini RC, everybody. I'm Ken, and today we are looking at the FX118 Fury Wagon from Furitek, and we are going to be adding a whole bunch of upgrades to this guy. Look at all this stuff. We're going to be adding a bunch of Furitek stuff to this guy. There's a bearing kit, some drive shafts, links, weights, stuff like that. And yeah, we're just going to basically take the Furitek stuff and put it on the truck and show you what Furitek has to offer for upgrades. There's also other aftermarket upgrades for this guy, but we wanted to show specifically the Furitek stuff. So let's dive into it. This might be a long one. All right, we got our Fury Wagon, and I just realized I lied. We're not going to do this Fury Wagon. We're going to do this Fury Wagon. This guy here has got the Evo Harvester front bumper on it. We've got the lights on this. It is lowered just a little bit, the body mounts, but it's not nearly as low as this guy because of the shocks, and no bumper on this guy. And it's just a little bit more comp-ish. So I figure if we're going to do the performance stuff, let's go ahead and do it on the truck that's already kind of lowered and doesn't have bumpers and stuff like that. So we're going to do this guy here, put this guy back on the shelf for now. All right, we're going to go ahead and go through this guy, do some stuffs to it. Let's see what we have specifically. We've got the front and rear brass hub set. These are some big fat brass hubs. We got the Delrin skids. So that'll be cool, especially if we want to relocate our electronics to the front, or at least lower into the front. That'll be good. We got our front rod ends, plastic rod ends, and steel actual links. Some drive shafts, steel drive shafts, steel suspension links, and the aluminum skid plate. We have a bearing set, and what is this here? That's right, the brass wheel hexes, just for extra weight. So we'll see. We'll see how much weight we really want to get on there, and how forward weight bias we want it. Maybe we'll just do two of the front on the front here. We'll see. But we definitely need to probably start with our bearings. I don't know. This thing's going to come pretty apart, I guess. So let's get going. So I guess first things first, we're going to go ahead and do the skid and the suspension links, I guess the drive shafts and the bearings that are in the transmission. So all that's going to be coming apart, and yeah, we'll get there. So I guess first thing we should realistically do is pull off all the wheels and tires. First thing you got to pull off is these little nut covers or hubs, whatever. They just kind of unscrew or pop off pretty easily. You can use your T-wrench if you need to, the biggest wrench on there, and then the rest come off with the 5.0 millimeter. You can just pop those guys off. Make sure when you're pulling these off, you don't lose your axle shaft pin that goes in here. And if you need to, you can always use a screwdriver to try to pop these guys off because they are tight sometimes. There we go. Pull our hexes out and our little pin here. Just make sure you don't lose these guys. So we're going to put them all up here. Pretty simple. So we're going to go ahead and pop the transmission out. And I think we'll go ahead and change the bearings in the transmission. And then when we get to the hubs, the brass knuckles and the rear weights, then we'll do the bearings in there. So it'll kind of be split into two parts. One doing the transmission and one when we do the rest. So I think we're going to go ahead and do transmission first, and then we will do the suspension links and our drive shafts, and probably the axles. So to pull your transmission out, it's just these three screws. This guy just pops right out. Very simple. So center drive shaft piece. Okay. See, we got a little bit of grease coming out of the trans. Do we want to pull out this wire? I guess it would make it easier, right? We'll go ahead and pull out our motor plug here. That's kind of annoying that we can't just push it down in there. Well, I guess we could. We just got to put a little bit of pressure on the tray here. Maybe, maybe not. We're going to go ahead and remove the tray because I think we're going to do our batteries on the skids anyway. So let's remove the tray. tray is just held in with these 2 screws on each side. It's going to help us reduce some of our weight. Not that the battery tray is heavy or anything, but we might as well. You always want to try to reduce high weight, like up high weight. You want your weight to always be as low as possible, and ideally on non-rotating mass. So that means you don't really want mass that rotates, like super heavy wheels and stuff like that. But it can be helpful as long as you don't go too overboard. But again, the most ideal place for weight is usually on the axles in some form or fashion. All right, there we go. That's interesting. Oh, those are just, okay. It's like, there's screws here. I guess we could have just popped those screws out, and then this whole tray could also come out. So if you don't want to pull those, but then these are just sitting in there for no reason. So you can do it either way. It's pretty clean and straightforward chassis. So, all right, let's go ahead and get into this. Go ahead and pull our drive shafts out. They're one of the few, if not only, places where you're going to have to use a Phillips head. It's just these little tiny screws. They don't often come in hex heads, so it's pretty common that these guys are Phillips head. Just want to put it back in there so we don't lose it. Okay. And now we'll start pulling apart the trans. See these 4 screws. We don't want to get confused with these actually. So we'll put these guys over here because they are part of that tray. We're not going to use them when we rebuild. So just remember, when you're taking apart the transmission, try to keep an eye on the lengths of the screws as you take them out, just in case there's different lengths, the positions of the screws, things like that. Try to take them out in a fashion that makes sense to you, where you can kind of remember which way they go back together. Remember, it always goes back together the opposite way it went apart. Okay. Trying to not lose our here. We don't want to get our gears all messed up. So just try to keep it all together. Okay, so it looks like we got 2 bushings here. So we'll go ahead and pop those out and put our bearings in there. So here's our Furitek little bearing kit. Silica gel, don't eat this stuff. And all of our bearings. It's a lot of bearings. I think a lot of that's because of the portals in this transmission, obviously, but I think a lot of it's the portals. So we'll go ahead and push our bushings out here. And these 2 are just 2 of these guys. Always make sure you get the bearings in straight, especially if you're putting them into aluminum. If this were an aluminum housing, you really got to be sure you're going in straight, because you can kind of get them cockeyed or crooked and you're screwed. They'll get stuck, or they won't go in all the way, or you'll think they're in all the way and they're not. When you put things together, you have tons of binding, and that's never a good thing. All right, so let's see if we can now, our magnetic tip is grabbing our bearings. Let's see if we can swap these over. Just helps keep track of things, swapping them over to this side. Let's see, we can pull this guy out, drop it in here. There's a little bushing here, don't lose that. If you saw our breakdown video of this, we had a little situation arise. Put those over here. This guy in here. This guy over here. Again, we're just trying to keep them in order so that we know how they go in there. And then this guy. Doesn't look like it comes out. So let's go ahead and replace the 2 bushings we see there. Actually, we're going to have to pull this motor plate off. Let's go ahead and do that. These are 2 longer screws. Okay. Should be able to pop out this bushing now. Get a new bushing in there, or bearing in there, excuse me. And then this bushing, this little tiny guy, you can't push out from the back, so you just kind of got to work it out. If you can avoid damaging it, you should, because you never know when you could use the bushings again. Maybe never, but if you're building like a mud bogger or a water rig, something like that, something that goes out on the beach, maybe you do want the bushings. All right, so this one is this little tiny guy. It's the one little guy. All right, let's go ahead and put this side back on. So you do have to be aware of your shaft pins and how these sit in there. See how there's little grooves in the gear. Make sure you're sitting in properly on the shaft pin. Otherwise things will not go back together right. There we go. Now we should be able to get this guy together. Ta-da! It's a little messy because there's a lot of grease in there. If you don't have much grease in there, then definitely consider throwing some grease in there. There's tons of different kinds you can use. We usually just use like white marine grease, or I don't know if it's white, but it's like I'll show you. This stuff here, Quicksilver marine grease. It's actually yellow. Some people use white lithium grease, stuff like that, but this is what we use. Never had an issue. Obviously there's white grease in there currently. And our last screw. Okay, now we can take a look at this side. There shouldn't be any bearings in here, actually. Yeah, it's just the motor. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something I was missing. Let's go ahead and get this grease back on the pinion here. Okay. That guy drops in there like so. And those go back together like so. We'll put our long screws back in. And those 4 screws are all the same length. So pretty simple. We'll get all these screws back in. We'll come back. All right, so we're all back together. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Again, just make sure you keep all your gears going back in the same order as you take it apart. I did want to point out that this transmission has a second output shaft. That output shaft, well, you can use it to run, farm equipment and whatnot, or it's counter-rotating. Okay, so what that means is we can, when we put our drive shaft in and do our axles on here, on the rear axle, we can have the other output shaft be our primary output shaft, and it'll rotate the opposite direction, which will help with torque twists and whatnot. But you do have to change your ring and pinion inside the diff to the other side. You have to flip that, and so we'll show how to do that when we get there. But flipping that around will help prevent torque twists because now you have a counter-rotating drive shaft. So this shaft will go one way, this shaft will go the other, and it, again, prevents torque twist. All right, just want to get all the grease off there, especially off the motor. You don't want to like overheat because there's grease sitting on the motor or something weird. And yeah, I think we're good to go. So we'll set this guy aside. I thought there was going to be a lot more bearings in the transmission, but I guess not. I suppose we have our axle, ring, and pinion, stuff like that, and then all of our portal bearings. So we'll see when we get there. But let's go ahead and do our suspension links. And I guess when we do our rear, we are going to have to flip the whole axle. So let's see here. Is that a thing? Can we do that? We may not be able to do that because our upper truss, I don't think we can just flip our ring and pinion in here, unfortunately. Because we can't just put our upper truss on the other side. Bummer. We're not going to be able to do the counter-rotating drive shaft on the rear and flip the pumpkin around. You need the metal housings to be able to do that, I believe, because of the way the truss is or the clearance in here. You know, you need to be able to put the ring on this side, which means we could just flip the axle over, but then our truss is on the bottom and our links can't attach. So I haven't looked at the aluminum axles, but from what I've seen or heard, the aluminum axles will allow you to flip it around. So if you're looking to do the counter rotating, and maybe at some point we'll get the aluminum axles just to show it. But yeah, you have to be able to at least get your ring and pinion flipped and your truss needs to stay on top. Anyway, all right, let's go ahead and get our links all changed out, which means we need to pull off our shocks and our links here. And we'll put on our new ones. So we're just going to go ahead and unscrew all of this. All right, we have all of our shocks unscrewed. Now we want to do our upper links. There is a nut right here, so you'll need some pliers. Just hang on to that guy. Go ahead and unscrew your forelink. This guy should come right out, no problem. Okay. And then we're going to do the same on the rear. All right, easy peasy. And let's go ahead and get our skid out. Okay, now these shocks, we're going to go ahead and just pop these off. So you have to use a little bit of pressure there and they'll come right off. We're going to put new ball joints in there that came with our links. So there will be new ball joints in those. And let's go ahead and get our new links and stuff so we can see where we're at. Try to stay a little organized here. Here's our links, our link ends, some screws, and the skid. Let's go ahead and get this skid out. Really dig the chamfering on this. I wish that the link, I mean, even the stock one is this way, but I really wish where the links mounted was more flush. I wish it was more flush, both on the stock and on the aluminum. I don't know if there's interference with the transmission or why they couldn't make this just a little more flush, but that would have been nice for sure. But it is what it is, so we will do it. Here's all of our steel links and our spacers for our shocks. All of our link ends and our ball joints. And then our screws. We'll go ahead and save these for later. I'm going to go ahead and put all the balls in the ball joints and we'll get this together and we'll come back. I do want you to be aware that one side of the link end is a little bit more opened up than the other. So that's the side you want to come at with your ball joint end. And then you can just use pliers or ball joint tool and just squeeze it in and work it in there. Okay. Your ball joint should be very loose. We'll get to that a little bit later when we start to get these over are all built. I'll show you a little trick to make sure you have no binding in your suspension. If you have any kind of flash, like this guy had a little bit of flashing, just kind of peel it out. Worst case, you can always use an X-Acto to just kind of clean it off. Definitely don't cut or, scrape away too much in there, because if you take off too much, your ball joints will just pop right out. So it's just to clean up that little bit of flashing from the mold, if there happens to be any. Pretty simple, and just don't overdo it. So to show this as well, you can use a little tiny screwdriver once you've got your threading started here, right? Get it going just a little bit, it'll get tight. You don't want your fingers to hurt, so just use a screwdriver, and here you go, just like so. Okay. It's an easy way. It kind of saves on your fingers a little bit. You do got to get them started though, because you want to make sure they're going on straight. And then once you're on, you're good to go. You can just, okay. Ta-da. All right, we've got all of our links together. And now we're just going to test each of our ball joints. And we do this by putting it on one of our drivers or screwdriver and just seeing how loose it is. You should have just a straight drop, right? Like it should drop no problem. Now if we switch to this side, let's see, it feels a little stiff. You can see it's not quite as loose. Let me see if I can find one that's stiff, because usually there is one. Maybe not though, we'll see. See how they're all kind of loose, the balls. I mean, you can kind of just see it too. You can feel it with your hand. These are all pretty good. This one's a little tight. So this one's a little stiff. So what we can do to fix that is we can take our pliers and we can make sure you're squared up on this link end. Also, we need to make sure our links are straight with the bend, right? But make sure you're squared up and put a little bit of pressure on there. Not a lot, just a little squeeze. And you should feel it loosen up just a little bit. A little squeeze. Now it's a little looser, which is good. We'll just go through all of them and check them before. So there's one. Doesn't really drop down. It's kind of hard to see because the camera's above, but I can hold it like this and it does not drop down. Okay, you can see that, right? And then I can push it down. So that's definitely one that, see, that one just flops. So we definitely need to loosen that up. And you want to do this again before you put your whole truck together, because once you put the truck together, you're not going to have any idea where that binding might be. You might end up sitting there trying to articulate your truck and, oh yeah, much better. And it feels like it's kind of stiffer than you want it to be, and you don't know why. It could be your link ends. And you'll have wished you went through as you were building and kind of tested things. I feel like that's a best practice always. Go through and test things as you're building. Make sure there's no binding in each little piece. See, look how loose that is now. Now you don't want it so loose that the ball joint pops out of the link end, obviously, but just enough. Oh, see, there's a real stiff one. Look at that. So that guy definitely needs to be loosened up. So we'll just square up our ball joint, square up our pliers on the link end, and just give it a little squeeze. Basically what you're doing is you're compressing the plastic into the ball. There we go. Nice and loose. So that's definitely, oh, this side's bad too. Nice. Okay. Alrighty, looking good. So now we'll go ahead and get our links. We're going to go ahead and, I don't know, I'm kind of doing this in a weird way, but I'm going to go ahead and attach our links to our skid here. So our rear upper links, or sorry, rear lower links. you're going to have your angled side towards the axle, right? And these little shorty screws are what are going to go into our skid. And we are going aluminum into aluminum here, so the rule there, a little bit of Loctite. Glad we've got our Loctite here, because usually it's upstairs, and I'm like, I don't want to run upstairs and get it, but you should always use Loctite when you're going metal into metal. Just make sure you don't get it on the plastic, because the Loctite will degrade plastic, and that is bad news. You do not want it to degrade and start to break your plastic. This does not seem like it wants to screw in well here. Kind of curious. Let's try this other side. Oh, you know what? I bet you they want, these are different. I bet you they want us to use these screws here. Yep, so these are different threadings, just be aware. So these smaller ones are going to be for our upper links. So we have 4, yeah, those are for the 4 upper links. So we're going to use the ones that came with the skid in our skid. Sorry about that. Again, just a tiny dab of Loctite, and then go ahead and thread yourself in. All right, we got our lower links all done. Now we'll just go ahead and go through on our upper links. Hopefully we can access these no problem without having to take our... Don't want to have to stress on this chassis, but we should be okay. Just a little bit of an angle. These are the shorty guys here. Get just a tiny bit of Loctite. You might actually want to just put these in by hand to make sure it goes in straight. Don't want it to cross thread. Yeah, there we go. And then we can come back in once we're threaded in and we can tighten it up. Okay. Just make sure you're doing the correct link on the correct side. You don't want to do your fronts on your back or anything like that. I'm going to go ahead and do the other 3 links here. All right. So all of our links are in now. Pretty simple there. Should be able to go ahead and run these to our upper links here. We reuse the long screws. These are actually a little bit longer than these guys here. These are for the shocks on the lowers. So when we get there, I'll show you that. We're going to have to put new ball joints in the shocks. Yeah, this guy will just thread into your upper truss on your axle. And it's interesting because this is threaded here, so you're actually going to want to get your screw in almost all the way. Basically, get your other side of your link over here, and right when you start to feel the screw, you're going to need to get your nut on there because you want the nut to tighten with the axle here. You don't want to have to pull the screw through the axle. So definitely make sure your nut goes on in a tight fashion against the link as you're screwing it in, and then you can use your screwdriver and your pliers to tighten it up. Again, you just don't want it to be tightening the screw against the axle housing and against the nut, and then you can try to use your pliers to tighten the nut a little bit just to make sure you're nice and snug. Okay. Make sure you've got nice freedom of movement in there. We're looking good. Wonder if this is longer or shorter. I didn't really pay attention. These should be the same length. Oh, wait. Did we use... Oh, my gird. We put the front axle on the rear. So, anyway, same thing, but the front goes on the front, guys. I don't know why we were thinking this is the front. This is definitely our rear. This is our front. All right. Even people who do this stuff all the time make mistakes. Our links are correct, just our axle goes to the front. I was wondering why our servo wire was so long. I was like, I don't remember it being so long. Maybe it just needs to be tucked. That's why it goes all the way to the front. Come on, Ken. Come on. All right. Our axles are all in with our upper links. Now we can go ahead and put our skid plate in. And we'll switch over our shock link ends, all that good stuff. So basically our shocks now, we're going to use little ball joints here. And you're going to, when you put these in these, you're going to want to make sure that the flat side, you can see there's a flange. So that flanged side is going to be on the outside. That way the shock can't slide off. If it ever was to like pop off, it will stay on and not just pull out, right? Like if it gets loose in there for some reason, it won't just pull out. These also seem like they're a little tight, so we can give just a little bit of a squeeze here and see if we can just loosen these up just a little bit. Now, because these do have a big flange on them, they're not going to have a ton of movement, but you do want a little bit of movement in there. Okay, there we go. We got some nice movement in there now. So we'll go ahead and do that to each shock, and then the shock will have a shock spacer, and the link will go in here like so. So it'll basically have the screw, the spacer, the link. Okay, and then that will go into our axle. So that's what we're going for. Alrighty. We're going to go ahead and put our skid in, and then we'll do all that. Again, with the skid, we are doing metal into metal now because it's an aluminum skid, so get a little bit of Loctite and make sure you don't over tighten. Tighten just enough to where it's snug, but definitely don't over tighten. That's the beauty of Loctite, is you don't have to over tighten to make sure your screw is secure. Okay. Just wanted to show this real quick, just in case you did it the same way we did it. Make sure all of your lower links are above or below, however you want to look at it. Make sure they're this way of your upper links, because if they're not, we had one that was down and we didn't notice, you can't get it through. Okay. So just be sure your upper links are, or your lower links are on the other side of your upper links. Okay. Or wait to put your lower links in until your skid is in. Either way. Like I said, we were kind of doing this in a goofy way. I don't know why we did it that way. Just want to make sure our fronts and rears were correct and all that good stuff. I don't know. We were just mirroring what was on here. But however you want to do it, you can do it. Just want to point out the little oops we had. All right, we're good to go here now. We can now put our shocks in, and so we will do that. We've got all of our links in. Everything's hooked up, our shocks, all that good stuff. And you can see we kind of have a clocking problem here. Our front is very, very clocked back, which you want, but not this much, which means our upper links are shorter or our lower links are longer than what the stock one was. And then same with the rear. Our upper links are longer or our lower links are shorter to some capacity, which is why it's clocking inward like this. Okay, so we can adjust that. You can always use spacers on the links that you want to make longer. If they're lower links, you can space them out to make them longer, which won't help us in the front here, would help us in the back. Or you can move your shock mounting or your link mounting positions here. So we're going to have to tuck this back here a little bit and help rotate this in by shortening or bringing back our rear upper link. And then our front upper link is going to have to move forward, probably all the way to this forwardmost position here. We'll see how that does. But yeah, it's interesting that these links are different lengths than the stock links. Yeah, either way, good thing we have adjustability in this chassis. One of the awesome things about this chassis.
A few moments later.
Got our links all fixed now. You can see here we had to put just a little bit of spacing. We basically unthreaded the link end like 1, and on this side maybe 2 turns just to kind of lengthen it out a little bit. I wanted to use this upper mount to get us a little bit of anti-dive a little bit. Really, you want it higher on this side, but that's fine. Hopefully this will help. So we move that forward, got us a little bit better angle there. Still clear our chassis, which is good. Got a little bit of a angle, so that's good. And then the rear here, same thing, just a little bit. And we mounted it in the third hole on the top. These ones we didn't do any adjustment in the length of the links. You definitely, when you're doing this, want to make sure that they are equally, you have equal number of turns on your link ends so that your links are exactly the same length. Because if they're a little bit longer on one side than the other, your axle will be kind of canted a little bit. And you can kind of tell by your spacing of your shocks. If one shock is a little bit closer than the other to your chassis, then you know something's going on. Or if your servo isn't centered, right, you'll know something is going on. Like, I'll have to force it, but if your servo looks like this, right, I'm doing it at an angle, but if you're looking straight on it and it looks like that, where it's closer on one side than the other, then you definitely have an issue where one of your links is longer than the opposing link. Okay, same on the rear here. All right, so next, I guess we can throw our transmission back in here. Pretty simple. Actually, I think maybe before we do that, we want to get our drive shaft ends on, so it's easier to, oh no, we got plenty of room in there. Just wanted to make sure we could access the drive shaft screw. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get this guy back in. I think now we'll go ahead and just start working on our axles. I'm going to pull out the drive shafts on both of the axles, and we will start getting those guys apart to do our bearings. Go ahead and start with the rear. We're going to pull off our portals. And there's just the 4 screws here. Once we get the portal housings off, we'll be able to pull off our diff cover and pull the axles apart. The axle shafts, get them out, because there is a bushing. There's bushings in here. Definitely at the output shaft here. Probably bushings on the sides. So we'll definitely need to get all this apart. Okay, so you can see how things are kind of together here. Don't lose your axle pin there, the cross pin. Actually, keep an eye on that guy. Now, we do need to still, actually, we don't need to pull this piece off because the axle shaft came right out. If this axle shaft didn't come out for some reason, we would have pulled that off. But we should be able to pull both of our housings, and then we'll get this guy open. Let me get this housing redone. So you got bearings on each side. Remember, an easy way to get bushings or bearings out are to use the thing that goes into them. See that? That'll help you pop her right out. And then this guy should come right out as well. And there's an axle shaft pin in there. Don't lose that. Okay. Then this guy here. Make sure your pin is set all the way in. If it's not, it's going to slip and things aren't going to go together right. Could be very bad. And this guy here. Actually, we're going to go ahead and pull this back out so we can use it to get this bushing out. And we are golden. Okay, and then all that will go back together once we're ready. So it's 4 bearings per side. Okay, I'm gonna get this other side off and then we'll get here. Now, we don't want to forget these guys. These are our brass weights for the knuckles and the rear portal covers. Look at that. So these are aluminum, and then they've got the brass that goes on top, like so. And so that's your new outer portal housing, which means we need to swap these over to these guys. So let's go ahead and get these matched up. Here's our fronts, and here's our rears. So we're actually going to pull all this stuff back out of here, and we're going to drop it right into here. Super simple. Again, just make sure your axle shaft pin is aligned and in the gear like it's supposed to be. It's a very tight fit in there. There we go. Our bearing can go back on top. And that's how we'll be. We don't need this guy anymore. We'll go ahead and do this side. And because we are putting these into a brand new housing, a lot of the grease is going to be missing, so we're going to add a little bit of grease in there. Once we get these guys back together, right before we put it all back into the truck, we will definitely grease it up. You don't need a ton, but you definitely want some. I mean, there is some still in the inner portal housings here, but we definitely want to add a little bit because it's going to be kind of dry. Beautiful. Get in here. All right. There's our ring for our ring and pinion. Here's our pinion. Okay, there's a bearing on each side, or a bushing on each side, so we'll pop this little guy out. Bam. And then we've got the one that goes here in the front. One that goes down inside. We'll just put that on the pinion here. Drop our pinion back down in there. Okay. And then the two on our spool here, which are a little bit larger. And our spool goes back in. Simple as that, guys. Get our grease kind of on our teeth there. There we go. Nice. So now we're good to go. We can put this all back together. Like I was saying, if we wanted to do the counter rotating here, we would have to flip this. And unfortunately, just because of the way the truss is, we can't. Normally we'd be able to pop these portals off, portal covers, and flip them around, and then flip the whole axle around. But again, we've got nowhere to mount our upper links if we do that. So that's unfortunate. We'll leave this rear diff cover off while we put these on. Makes it easier to get our portal covers on. So you got to get that drive shaft, axle shaft keyed in. All right, seems good. So we're going to go ahead and use the stock screws to put these guys back in. The screws that came with these guys here are a little tiny bit larger, and they go in the front here. Just make sure you don't over tighten these guys, because again, you're going into plastic. And I think these brass housings are a little thicker, so you have a little bit less thread gripping onto the plastic. So just be careful not to over tighten. Just make them snug. Because they're going into plastic, you shouldn't have any issues backing out or anything crazy like that. If we're going into metal, you would definitely Loctite it, but we're going into the plastic axle housing. Once you've got all your screws in, just kind of check and make sure your axle's freely moving. There's nothing binding up, because again, once you get it all together, if you find binding, it might be hard to identify where that binding is coming from. You know, you could have a slipped pin in there, or you just tightened it down too much and it's actually compressing the gears in there, things of that nature. So just always kind of check along the way. Everything feels nice and smooth, so we're good to go. We'll put our diff cover back on, get our screws in, and start on the front. And with our fronts, we're going to pull off our steering linkage, which again, we will be replacing with some steel steering links, same as this stuff here. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and pop them off the knuckles. Get our bearings and weights added to our knuckles. So your C-hubs here just have the screw at the top and the screw at the bottom. There are little bushings in there, I believe. It's our first time taking this guy apart, so let's see here. Yeah, there's little bushings, see that? So don't lose those bushings. Make sure they don't fall out while you're working on stuff. And if they do fall out, just know that this flat portion here is on the inside. That kind of acts as a bushing or bearing on your steering knuckle. Okay, so don't let those fall out. And then your front's going to be the same as we have one fall out. Just if they do fall out, just keep track of them. So same thing here. We're going to open this guy up and swap it all over to our weighted knuckles. And these guys will be using the screws that came with. These ones look way dry. Way drier than the rears were, that's for sure. Okay. We don't even need to pull those bearings or those bushings out actually, because it's all going to be going into our new ones. So let's see, which side do we need? We need this one. They are labeled left and right. Which is interesting because this says right and this says left. It is kind of odd that this is labeled right and this is labeled left, but the stock truck is labeled left. This does fit right in there, so if you want to use the stock knuckle, inner portal housing, whatever, you can, but obviously we want to use the aluminums because this is kind of a point of failure, just in case. Maybe not so much on a crawler, but on monster trucks and stuff, you definitely break these a lot. But yeah, go ahead and go with this. Get all of our bearings going here. That big guy goes right there. You gotta be careful with this pin for the CVD. It sometimes pops out. Just make sure you slide that guy in. That'll get you nice and tucked. Okay. And because we're going into totally new housings, we definitely need to add some grease in there. All right, beautiful. And because we're going metal into metal, we will be using some Loctite. And you don't need a ton, just a little dab. And we're going to test it real quick, see how we're still smooth, and we are. Awesome. Awesome, awesome. Get our other 2 screws in. We'll go on to the next guy. Both of our knuckles are buttery smooth, and now we're going to do the diff. Remember, you are going to have leftover screws after doing those knuckles. You have these 8 screws up here because you used the screws that came with. You know, it'd be cool if Furitek made a straight axle conversion for these, because all you need to do is make smaller C-hubs, right? And new knuckles. And then on the rear, just have basically a little straight axle cap with straight axles in there. Then you could do a straight axle setup versus a portal setup if you'd rather that. Okay. Your servo might pop off here, at least on the front. The back is still attached to our links. And there we go. Super simple. Again, we'll put a little bit of grease in this guy here. All right. So first we'll get our little bushings in here. Then we can get our knuckles in there. Like so. And we are going into metal here, so you could also do just a tiny bit of Loctite on this guy. Just make sure you don't get it on the C-hub here. So just a tiny bit to get it through that bushing and into your knuckle. You should be able to go fairly tight, but again, don't over tighten, especially you don't have to because we're using this Loctite. Again, just be sure not to get the Loctite on the plastic because Loctite degrades plastic. And you'll be having broken C-hubs. And make sure you're nice and smooth still. If you over tighten or something, could cause that to be a little bindy. So I think we're good here. Make sure you don't have any slop. Up and down. Just a little bit, but nothing too crazy. Try to tighten it down a little bit more. No, that's about it. So you're going to have a little tiny bit of slop in there, but not much. If that really bothers you, you can always just put a little shimming in there. Something of that nature. Put a little shim at the top here if you need to. You just don't want it to start binding. If you shim it too much, you'll bind and you'll be making your servo work harder than it needs to. Okay, so that's all of our bushings. All the bearings are now in the truck. Everything should be much smoother. Let's just go ahead and get our other knuckle on and our diff cover on, and then we will move on to our steering links. Now on to our steering links. I can already feel some good weight coming in on this guy. Just down low, feels nice. Digging that. So steering links are pretty much going to be the same as the suspension links. Very simple. Just kind of test your rod ends as you go. Make sure that they're nice and loose. The nice thing about this kind of steering link is you can, to a degree, adjust your toe in and toe out if you want. So that is good. Also, you'll just have a little bit less play in your steering because these little plastic ones are kind of weak. So definitely excited to get some good links. So again, just test all your different ball joints and whatnot. We'll get these guys put together and get them mounted on. All right, so we're going to go ahead and pull off our little servo horn screw ball joint that's here. This is a 4mm nut that's on there. This should be able to just pop right out. There we go. We're not going to be using this guy or any of this. This set comes with all new stuff. So your link goes like this with the shorter end on the side. And then we can just screw this guy straight in. Again, we're going into metal, so we're going to give ourselves just a tiny bit of Loctite. Get it nice and snug. All right. And then get this side, same thing. Nice and snug. And yeah, looks good. If you want to toe in or toe out it, you can by screwing it in and out, getting spacers in there. If you want to do toe out, I don't know how far toe in you'll be able to go because it's pretty far in right now. I don't think you can get it much further, but you could always trim down your link ends, the plastic link ends. If you just like Dremelled them or exacted them down, you could probably screw them in even further, and that'll get you some toe in if you wanted that. So we're actually going to screw this in from the front. Let's see, do we want this like that? Yeah. So we'll go ahead and put our screw in through the front, and then we'll put the nut on the back. You know, just because it'd be easier than trying to put the nut on the front and screwing it in from the back, unless we took our servo horn off. If we took our servo horn off, then it's easy, but we'll just go ahead and needle nose this guy. And actually get a little bit of Loctite in that, just a tiny bit. Nice and snug. And perfect. We're not hitting. The links aren't hitting. The servo horn's not hitting on this link. It's real close, but it's not actually hitting, so that's good. We should be golden here. Our steering trim stays the same. You shouldn't have to adjust that too much. Yeah, exciting. All right. So what's left? What's left here, guys? Got some wheel weights, our drive shafts, and our Delrin skid. Let's get our drive shafts in. So these are steel drive shafts. They seem good. When we put our drive shafts in, make sure you phase them. What phasing is making sure that the ears on the sides are facing the same direction. See how those are on the same side here? Whereas if I turn this one click, now our ear is different. That'll create vibration and whatnot at high speeds. Also, you can align the screw holes. See our screw hole and our screw hole. Make sure they're the same direction, and that'll get us in phase as well. Okay, there's two different thoughts or theories or whatever on how to install drive shafts, whether you're putting the male end on the axle and the female end up into the transmission, or the opposite of that. And there's, I guess, multiple reasons on why to do either one. The thought process of mounting it this way, where it's going, you have your truck like so, and you're going like this. The reason to mount it with the female side at the transmission is because if dirt and grime get pushed up into here, ideally, because the drive shaft is angled downward, the dirt and grime would have a harder time to go up in there, or it would come back out, and it would help prevent binding and things of that nature. Now, how often that actually happens and you actually get dirt and grime up in there, that's, to be debated, I suppose. But that was, for a very long time, my thought process. And even like the axial trucks, when they come from the factory, they are that direction. I think this one was as well, at least one of them. The other one is a split drive shaft, so it's got female ends on both sides. Anyway, the other thought process of going this way is that you have less chance of your drive shaft actually snagging on rocks because it's all smooth. So the longer portion is what's exposed. So when you're like this and you've got an exposed drive shaft, you're going to be rubbing on this portion of the drive shaft versus in this area here where you could get snagged up and caught on rocks. If we flip this around and you're like this, you have this gap here that kind of allows you to get snagged up. So that's the other thought process. I think we're going to go this way. I think we're going to go with the female side down. I mean, chances of getting dirt and stuff snagged up in there are pretty low, I think, and chances of hitting the drive shaft are much higher. So we're going to go that way. All right, I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, educate on the different ways of doing the drive shaft, the different thought processes. Maybe if you're doing like a mud truck, you'd want the drive shafts going the other way so that dirt and mud has a harder time staying inside the drive shaft. That would make sense to me there, and you're not rock crawling. You know, you're not doing like hardcore rock crawling. I think that would make sense. But for a rock crawler, I'm thinking it's probably better to do the female side at the axle. I think. I don't know. These are not D-ringed or D-slotted. They're just regular full O slots. So be aware of that. Your shaft, output shafts are D-slotted. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm going to go ahead and put the screw to the flat side. That way we're screwing more across the flat side and into the rounded side, because the threading on the output shaft is on the outside. You can also, as always, Loctite it up a little bit, because these are metal into metal. And these do have a pretty good chance of coming out if you don't tighten them or Loctite them. So a little bit of Loctite in there should help quite a bit. The metal drive shafts will help a ton with durability as well. So something to keep in mind. All right. So now remember to put your drive shaft into the correct output shaft here. If you're not doing the counter rotation and all that good stuff, you're going to want to have it on the side that's the same as the front shaft. So there's a shaft on the front on this side, so you're going to want to attach it to the shaft on this side, not this side. Again, we're making sure we're phased. And then we'll go ahead and slide this guy in there. All right, same here on the drive shaft here. We're good to go. We accessed through the side here, if you're wondering. It's the easiest way to kind of get that drive shaft in with the motor in there. And we are golden now. You always kind of want to make sure that that's what we want to check for. Looks like we are bottoming out on our drive shaft. So under full compression, you can see we're not actually able to fully compress. That's because our drive shaft is actually binding. It's actually hitting when we try to compress. So what that means is we need this to be shorter, unfortunately. Okay, so we're going to pull this guy off, and I'm going to Dremel this down just a little bit. I'll show you. The back is fine. See how we've got a little bit of spacing there? Tiny bit of space. We're not bottoming out. Bummer. So I'll show you why that's a big deal. So we're good to go here, right? Wire's really good. Okay, but as you compress, it's actually going to put strain on your motor. See that? That's because it's pushing and binding. So you don't want that. So we're going to trim this guy down. Not much, but we definitely need to a little bit. So let's get it back out. Get the female end back out. And it should be pretty simple. Unfortunate that that is the way it is, but it is what it is. The only other option is to try to extend your links forward. So stretch this out a little bit, move this guy back forward, move the whole thing forward, but then you will start hitting on your frame. So we're just going to go ahead and take that down. It's pretty easy, but you do need a Dremel, unfortunately. Okay, let's just check our male end, see how much space we have. So when we're bottoming out, we do still have space. What I'm looking at here is when it's totally bottomed out, is it exposing itself through here? It may end up coming out through here, and see if your male shaft starts to push out and it hits on your U-joint here, then you have a different kind of issue. So you may need to trim here and off the end of the male just a little bit, but we'll start here and see if we can completely bottom out, giving us more space without it exposing itself there. So I'm just going to take a Dremel. I'm just going to Dremel it down. I hope we'll get warm, so maybe get a cup of water or a wet paper towel to kind of cool it off, or just take breaks. So we gotta go a little bit more still. So that definitely seems a little better, and we're not exposed here. Let's turn our motor here, so we can get this to turn a little bit so I can show you. Our male is not pushing through, so that's good. I think we could go just a little bit, tiny bit more. I just want to be safe. You don't want to go too much. If you go too much, then your drive shaft will pop out. So we're going to do a little more, and then we'll be done. All right, I would say we are now good. I'll go ahead and give you the measurement of what we're down to. 27.8. You'll probably go all the way down to 27.5. Basically, this guy here, 14.6. But yeah, basically that. 27.5, 27. Again, depending on how your links are set up, yours might be a little different, so I wouldn't just cut to my spec, but at least you'll have an idea. And there we go. Now we got that tiny bit of space in there. So we can now fully compress, no problem. Again, that's part of the hobby. You know, a lot of manufacturers, depending on where they source stuff from or how you set things up, things are going to need a little bit of adjustment. So don't be scared to get in there and do stuff like that. Dremmeling that down isn't a huge deal. Again, you do need a Dremel though. I highly recommend you get a Dremel if you're in the RC hobby. It will help you a ton. I use it all the time. So definitely probably one of the best investments from a tool standpoint is a Dremel. Just FYI. They're freaking sweet. All right, so we're good now. What's next? I guess we do our Delrin skids, right? And that's these guys. These are called the Furitek Corsair CNC Delrin sliders for the Fury Wagon. Delrin is a type of plastic. It's super slick, and they have to mill it. So it's not like a molded thing. It's a milled piece of Delrin. Super slick. We use it in racing a lot. A lot of parts are made out of Delrin for our mini Zs and stuff like that. So Delrin is good stuff. It looks like these guys just mount straight on using the stock screws. So go ahead and pop them out and get these guys on. Now I do want to caution you that these do not come with longer screws. So when you're putting these in, you can see how much thread we're actually going to be using. It's kind of hard to tell, but there's just it's not a ton. So make sure when you're screwing it in, don't over tighten. Just as you start to feel resistance, that's probably enough. Maybe just a little bit more just to make it snug. But again, do not over tighten these because you're not going in super deep into the skid here, or the the belly plate. Okay. Now we are going into a metal belly plate, so it's probably going to hold. We're going to be able to tighten it down a little more than if it were plastic. But if you're going into the plastic belly plate, just be sure you're not going to over tighten that guy. And there we are, guys. One of the nice things about skids like this is it gives you a place to mount your batteries and a place to mount your electronics straight onto the lowest portion of the truck that you can. And you can usually mount them kind of forward, right? So you get all this weight front and low, which is exactly what you want. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and relocate this stuff and get our battery in there. So you can see how we mounted our electronics here. Got our cables coiled. I'm going to show you kind of how we did that. We usually just use a tool here, and then we will wrap it around that tool. Just get it nice and tight. Just make sure when you're doing this, you don't pull on the connector. You don't want to have it pull out or anything, but you can wrap this guy pretty nice and tight. Just get it coiled on there. I'm going to leave this straight in here, but you can kind of do that, and like I said, just get it tight. And if you really want to make sure it holds its form, you can heat it just a little bit. So we'll sometimes take a lighter and we'll just give it a little heat. Nothing crazy. You don't want to melt it. Just heat it up just a little tiny bit. You're able to get it nice and tight. and it will hold your coil pretty well. That's a good way to shorten up wires without having to cut things and things of that nature. And that just gets it nice and coiled. And you can tighten it up more. We just did this one real quick, but yeah. Should be good. And now we'll do our battery. So what I think I'm going to end up doing with the battery is we have these little rubber bands that we use. And we use these on like all of our batteries actually. I'll show you this little tip. Every single one of our batteries has a little rubber band around it. I think we got them on Amazon for like $5 for 1,000 of them or something crazy. Got different sizes. Got a small, medium, and a large. Okay. All these are the smalls. They stretch pretty well. But anyway, what I think I'm going to do, I'll use a medium here. So medium should be fine. We'll see. Is I think I'm just going to tuck this underneath here. Problem is, or maybe we'll put it on the side here like this so that it's not going across the Delrin, because we want to leave that. We don't want the rubber band just going across it. So I think we'll back these screws out a little, put our rubber band around it. It'll be like this. And then we'll be able to just put our battery in there and twist it. It'll hold our battery in. So we just went and backed our screws out a little. We'll take our rubber band, stick it in there, bring it through like this. Kind of put some tautness on it. We'll tighten this guy down. Okay, now we've got a rubber band, which means if we want to throw our battery in there, we can just go like this, and it'll hold it in there just fine. It also allows us to throw different sizes in there. If we want to use one of these little guys, we can get that in there. Or our big old stock battery. Boom. And we're golden. Okay. That's not going anywhere. Especially once you have the body on there. We could also put a second rubber band on there and have it twist one way and twist the other way, and it'll really hold it in good. But I think we'll be fine for now. I'm not liking... There we go. We'll just do that. Kind of helps keep the wire away from our motor. Yeah, buddy. Pretty sweet. All right, so now all we've really got left are these wheel weights. Like hub weights, I guess. Hex Hubs. Yeah, buddy. So we'll throw those on there, see how much weight we get. Well, might end up just running only the fronts. But we'll do a final weight with this versus a totally stock FX118. Show you the weight difference with the stuff we've added. Well, let me get it. All right, we're all done up. Got our wheels and tires back on. Unfortunately, with these hexes on there, they take up a little bit more space than the normal little hex hubs. So we can't get our nut on as far, so we can't do our wheel caps, our hub caps on there. There's not enough room to grip. So that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. It's fine. Most of the time we don't run those things anyway, so not a big deal. All right, let's go ahead and weigh this guy and compare it to a stock rig. So here's our stock rig. The only difference on these two, other than the upgrades, is this guy has a bumper and the upgraded one does not. So it looks like we are right at 314 grams. Yeah, 314, almost 315. And then our upgraded guy, bam, 447, 448. So 448 minus our 313, 314, 313. So 135 extra grams. Now, it's not just 135 extra grams. It's 135 grams lowered, right? It's all lower. So we didn't add any weight up above basically our link line, where our links are, the lowest portion of the chassis. We didn't add any weight above that. So that's all really good weight. You know, obviously tons of weight on these wheels Again, we may pull the rear off just depending on, we still got pretty good forward weight bias, but maybe not as much as we'd like. It's about our center right there. Let's get out of here. Yeah, our center is right in the middle of the skid. Actually, right towards the back here. That's where I'm sitting. Let's see this guy here. Oh, man. Yeah, just about the same. Looks like our weight bias is pretty close to the same. So it didn't really change the weight bias too much. It's a little bit more forward because our electronics are forward. But everything else is probably going to be close to the same. We do have metal links now, so the rear links and rear drive shaft, because they're metal versus the plastic, are going to be a little heavier. These longer ones are a little heavier than the front ones, so that's going to add a little weight to the back. But then we do have the aluminum knuckles and aluminum up here, so that's going to add weight to the front. Moving our electronics forward and down is going to move weight to the front. But I think we might need just a little bit more, so we'll pull off the weights on the rear. It's not really about adding a ton of weight, right? It's about adding good weight and removing weight where you can. So if we could remove as much weight as we can off the top, that's a good thing. Same with the body, right? That's why we're going to be running this body with no extras. It doesn't have the little mirrors or the roll cage or the lights or any of that. We're going to run this body as light as possible at the top, while still having a body, obviously. And it's lowered, so it gets our COG as low as possible. Center of gravity is pretty low on there. Our mounts are as low as they're going to get. So, yeah, should be golden here. Let's flush. I'm excited. All right, let's go drive it a little bit. And actually, before we go run it, I went in and pulled out these rear weights. They weigh like 11.5 grams each, so that's a total of 23 grams we pulled off. That's going to put us from 448 down to 425. But now we do have a much better forward bias. You can see here. I mean, it's hard to tell, right? But obviously, we're going to be 23 grams less in the rear. I can feel it here. My finger is now sitting here. So basically, we moved from about here to about here as far as our center of gravity, forward to rear. So that'll help us with a little bit of the uphill incline stuff. Yeah, so figured I'd just share that with you real quick. It also, like I said, these are a little bit wider when you use these guys. I don't know by how much, but you can kind of see right here just on the nut. So this nut's got very little showing. The nut on the rear has got just a little bit more. I mean, it's basically the width of my driver. So what is this? 1.5? So about 1.5 millimeters, right? Yeah. So basically, yeah, you're getting maybe an extra 2 to 3 millimeters of width using these. So we're going to be a little bit more narrow in the rear by 2 or 3 millimeters total, but whatever, not a big deal. You really can't even tell. So I'm not too worried about that. All right. Okay, let's get the body back on. Let's go drive it around. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I know it was a long one. I appreciate you hanging out with me the whole time. Tons of awesome upgrades on this guy. If you have an FX118, I would highly recommend, getting some of this stuff. Definitely dig the link set, the weight on the knuckles here, the front brass and the aluminum knuckles. That's a good upgrade for sure. The Delrin sliders, definitely awesome because you can relocate all your electronics, move them forward. Getting that forward weight bias really helps you on the uphill inclines. It helps it kind of dig in and pull itself up. You really don't want to add a ton of weight because then the truck has to pull all the weight, but adding weight towards the front and down low, yep, that's the answer. So definitely check this stuff out. We'll put links down in the description. They're not even affiliate links, guys, so we don't make any money on you clicking those links. Because Furitek doesn't have an affiliate program, but I want you to be able to find the stuff easily. And yeah, definitely check it out. I know they have some other stuff. I think they have the aluminum housings and things of that nature. So, I definitely would dig into some of the other options out there. We haven't even upgraded our wheels and tires yet. We're still running on the stock wheels and tires. So at some point we'll do that. These tires are actually not too bad. And the wheels, they're just plastic B-locks. So definitely want to upgrade those at some point. We have a metric ton of wheels and tires and stuff. So we got to get something else on here other than stock. There's no reason any of my rigs should have stock wheels and tires because we have so many wheels and tires to put on things. I just haven't gotten there. Plus, sometimes I like to show the stock wheels and tires so you can see that, you can still perform with that stuff if you do the kind of the right upgrades and the right changes. Not that wheels and tires aren't the first upgrade most people do, and justifiably so. But yeah, I just like to show it like that sometimes. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Do everything you can to support the channel if you like the channel. We really appreciate all the support. We appreciate all of our channel members who get to watch these videos early with no ads. So if you want to be a channel member, help support the channel. That way we can bring you awesome content like this. We really appreciate it. So thank you to everybody that is a member. Also, thanks to all the subscribers, guys. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, and hit that notification bell. The subscription button is literally just a single click for you guys, but it means so much to me, and it really helps the channel out, and it gets us more exposure in the feeds. Also, the like button gets us more exposure. Commenting down below. Why don't you comment down below getting it right? Because FX118 is definitely getting some things right here, and the upgrades make it even more so too. So we appreciate Furitek for making awesome products. The brushless ready to run, first to market like that, pretty sweet, and for a killer price. So if you haven't checked out an FX118, I don't know why you're watching this video. It's a long video to watch if you don't own one of these guys. But if you don't own one, if you've committed to this video, you probably should commit to just getting one because they're really well priced and they're awesome performers for the price for sure. Anyway, guys, again, thanks a ton for supporting the channel. Check out our swag. We got a bunch of swag. We don't make any money on it, really, maybe $1 or $2, but it does help support the channel as well just by showing off your support. So again, thanks a ton to everybody. You're all awesome. I hope you're having a great holiday, because this is almost Christmas time, like in 2 weeks, a week, something like that. Almost Christmas time. Hope you're having a great holiday. Hope you're having just a great week in general. Get out there and build something awesome. Build a car, build a course, build a community, and then smash it, crash it, and bash it. But don't break the expensive parts. Also, introduce somebody new to the hobby. If you haven't had anybody new coming into the hobby lately, maybe it's your turn to invite them, let them run a truck, let them run a car, show them what it's about, have them fall in love like we have. All right, guys. Till next time, peace.